to start this video by saying I think you can play jazz on absolutely any guitar. So don't let the idea that you need a certain type of guitar hold you back from starting to try to play jazz. My first jazz guitar was a Music Man Sub 1, and it became a jazz guitar when I decided to buy some flat wound strings and string it up with them, and I had to adjust the neck. And you'll find that flat wound strings on pretty much any guitar give it a radically different feel. But another point to make is that you don't even need to be using flat wound strings to be playing jazz, right? Jazz kind of is a very broad church of stuff, and the idea for me is that maybe the jazz guitar can be your switch, so this is why I think something like a hollow body guitar can be a really good instrument to try and encourage you to play jazz, because they're, in some cases, pretty limited instruments that you can't really do much else on, in my experience. I know some people have played other styles of music on an ES175 or whatever, but actually they feed back an awful lot, even on clean tones, in my experience. I couldn't imagine playing anything other than jazz on one of these. I know also there might be some kind of country style stuff or rockabilly, or I think there's even a video with Bryan Adams playing one, but unless you're stuffing the body with something, I don't think you can get away with using much gain with these things in a live environment. All that is to say, your first instrument that you learn jazz on should be the one probably that you've got now, because playing jazz is a long-term thing, and it's going to require a lot of practice, a lot of actually listening to stuff, actually trying to play stuff. And one of the things that I try to show on this channel is that you can pretty much play something like jazz. If I can play jazz at all, I can do it on most of my guitars. So an ES339 was a guitar that I really like to play jazz on, like a little ES335, but in a smaller body. That was an Epiphone that I have. I've played jazz on an SG, and there are a few examples of players that have done that as well. A Les Paul is a really good instrument for jazz stuff. A Squier J Mascis is based on a Jazzmaster, and that was initially designed for jazz players, believe it or not. It says Jazzmaster in the title, doesn't it? That's sort of the clue. A Telecaster is a great guitar for jazz. Look at players like Ed Bickett, or look at players like Tim Lurch, look at players like Ted Green. Basically the instrument is not the limitation. Strats, there are players that play those, Osnoy, Lorne Lofsky, other players. And, jazz itself is as I say, a broad church of different styles of music. For me, before I got this guitar, I experimented with quite a lot of other styles of guitar. And so this has stopped that experimentation, which for me is why this has been the best jazz guitar for me, because it has necessarily stopped me looking for other guitars that can be a bit of a distraction. So leading up to this, I think my first proper jazz guitar, so I said I got the Sub 1 and I put some flat wounds on it. It was a guitar that I already had, and I thought, I'm not using that at the moment, I'll put some flat wound strings on it. I think some Rotor Sound top tape I put on that, and was trying to play the Pat Metheny thing. Now, I think the most important thing is to get used to this tone knob, maybe rolling that back off. That's quite fashionable in jazz. Certainly players like Jim Hall, Pat Metheny like to have this tone knob rolled way back. And also the idea of just playing through a fully clean tone, I think, is a big part of one of the pieces of advice that I try to pay attention to, I don't know if anyone has ever said this, but the idea of playing lighter really, for me, works quite well for jazz, because the idea of, trying to balance chords and melody and stuff like that works better, I find, if your control of the melody and chords at a state where you could go louder if you needed to. So playing with a lighter touch, I think, is a good thing. Using a slightly thicker pick as well can help. necessarily with jazz, quite a lot of it can be based around sort of a more picking style rather than legato. Would probably be more close to something like where you're going to be more likely to be alternate picking things. And that again works really nicely with a heavier pick and a lighter touch. So instead of this kind of more, you know, heavy kind of style, I find that that can get a little bit brash sounding. I would personally advise trying to pick everything a bit lighter. And positioning wise, I also try to pick over this neck pickup. For some reason that works quite nicely for me. That is why I have this tape here, because you get less of a pick noise if you accidentally hit the pickup. It's because I'm trying to pick over this pickup for tonal reasons. You get a slightly more fluty sound. And over here, you get like a more stringy sound. And that's true of pretty much every guitar. So something to bear in mind, picking position does make a huge difference. So pick a bit lighter than you're used to doing, and also pick a little bit closer to the kind of neck pickup. The other thing that I think is heavy strings are kind of a friend of jazz, because you'll notice that within jazz, typically people don't do a lot of vibrato or bending, and what can help that is having more string resistance, so that you're less tempted to do the kind of more guitaristy things that you might be more used to doing, especially if you're like me, you come to the genre from like rock or metal playing. That's one thing that heavy strings are good for. And also I think heavier strings can be a bit easier to kind of alternate pick on for some reason. Having more resistance in the right hand can often be a good thing. The opposite kind of factor is when you're picking too hard and the strings are thinner, you have less headroom and you get more of like that thing where you've kind of overpicked the string, if that makes sense. So like I said, you could start on any guitar, but my kind of journey through jazz guitars, an Ibanez PM35 was relatively inexpensive at the time. I think Ibanez makes some still now really good hollow bodies that are good choices for this sort of stuff. I think it might be AF 200 or something like that. I'll flash it up on the screen. But that one's like a really bare bones hollow body jazz guitar with a neck pickup. And I think that would be a really good starting point. Epiphone ES339 for me, I thought was a really good ideal kind of starting point for a more jazzy guitar, or an ES335. And the good thing about the 339 or 335 is that those guitars kind of work for a lot of other styles as well. So a 335 or a 339 could be ideal. A Telecaster as well could be a really good bet. The kind of most authentic thing that I came across was the ES175 Premium. Quite expensive, but you got real Gibson pickups in it. So that was quite nice. It had quite a skinny neck though. I didn't love that about it. But aside from that, it sounded really good to play, and was pretty decent. It had a dodgily cut nut, but it did feel and sound pretty good. I also had a Hofner built, fully like carved arch top thing, and that was too lively to kind of use with an amp at all live. And this is the thing that I'm saying, like these full hollow body guitars, if you use some of the more modern guitar amps like the Mesa Boogie Lone Star for instance, or something like a Two Rock, they have a lot of bass response, and the bass tends to be the thing that feeds back. So you do have to be careful with that sort of thing. And for that reason, for me, if you were playing at a bit of volume, then a fully carved arch top might not be the best way to go. I think a laminated guitar, and even if you're thinking about playing with like a drummer and stuff, something like a 335, 339, or even a Telecaster might be a better bet than a fully hollow guitar. These are quite tricky to use live. And then this one I bought for Dad, kind of. But this has been the one that killed all the gas. So this is a Herb Ellis from about 91. So we have a mahogany neck, I believe, then laminated maple, and one pickup here. There's really nothing much going on with these kind of guitars. They're relatively simple. This one's heavy, I think, for an ES175. I'll go and weigh it and flash it up on screen. It's got a 7 in the serial number, which is important, isn't it? But yeah, I think these were invented in about 1949. My friend David Beebe has one from, I think, 1951 or 1952, which is wild. So you can still find like even old examples of these guitars, particularly in America. There's a few of them knocking around, right? Over here, they're expensive. I think this was about £1,500, but it's quite a lot of money. But this has meant that I don't look at other more expensive hollow bodies, because I feel like for the money, the tone and everything is there for me. It's got that vibe. And when I pick it up, it does feel like a guitar that wants jazz to be played on it. So that's a nice thing. So I run this with the volume up full and the tone up full, and you get still quite a dark tone. So that's kind of nice. What am I playing? So yeah, you could pretty much play jazz on any guitar, but this one for me has been the one that has been the best guitar, because it stopped me looking for other guitars out there, and for the money, I think that's an ideal thing. I sold pretty much every other jazz guitar that I've got. I can still play jazz on a Tele or a Jazzmaster style guitar that I own, or a Les Paul, but this is my one and only jazz guitar, and that's a nice thing. I think it's nice to have this kind of minimal approach, and if you can limit yourself to one thing for one job, then in a way you kind of win, because you don't get caught up in the whole gear thing. When it comes to the kind of tones, I use an HX Stomp for my jazz tones, and it's comprised of like an AC30 type simulation and a Princeton simulation. A Vox AC30, if you turn it down really quiet, I find this out in real life, has a really nice tone for jazz stuff. You just don't want to have any breakup in it. So clean tones are the way forward, I find. Even plugging in just direct with a compressor can work really well for jazz. It's quite simple stuff. You just want it to be clean, and then you maybe want to roll off your tone knob a little bit. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. So if you're thinking, do I need to buy any special gear for jazz? The answer is no. But eventually, maybe think about buying one jazz guitar that kind of gets you off of the gas roundabout and more concentrated on just playing. I don't know. That's my thoughts on that. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your first and last jazz guitar. Is there any such thing as a jazz guitar? I mean, if there was one, it would probably be the ES175, right? But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Catch you in another video soon. Here's some more Misty. Cheers.